Today on Off the Clock, we are going to start a two-part series on remote work. Our first episode is going to center on what is happening with regard to remote work and what businesses can take away to help determine what will work best for their organization and employees. Welcome to Off the Clock, the webcast of employment attorneys at Miller Johnson, where we discuss what is happening in the HR world and provide practical insight and advice. There's been some fun stories in the news recently with regard to remote work involving really large companies.
Well, yeah, and it follows a theme that we're all still experimenting a little bit.
Yes.
Right? We were thrown into it involuntarily, most of us, in 2020, obviously. And ever since then, I think companies have been trying to find their footing.
That's right.
Right?
That's a good way to put it.
What will work best in their organization.
Right. And for their employees.
And for their employees, and what are other organizations doing, and what do we need to do to stay competitive, right? And all of that. And we've seen swings, right, in percentages across the country, and then even within certain companies, right? There have been swings back and forth. So let's talk about just a few that have been in the news.
Yes. Yeah.
Recently.
Big stories. First one that comes to mind is Starbucks.
Yes.
You know a little bit about that. Why don't you tell that story?
I do. I have to do a shout out to one of my favorite podcasts, other than ours, of course.
Okay.
All right. Acquired. They do real deep dives, 2 to 3 hour episodes on different companies. There was recently one on Starbucks with Howard Schultz. So I've started getting kind of into the history of Starbucks. And then after I listened to that just fascinating episode, Starbucks hired a new CEO.
Okay.
When Howard Schultz, the founder, stepped back in as CEO after a hiatus, which I won't get into. You could listen to that Acquired episode. In 2023, he instituted everyone has to come back to work policy.
Interesting. Like full time?
Yes. He wanted everyone back in Seattle. This caused quite a hubbub because by that point, some people either had moved, Seattle's quite expensive, as you may know, or maybe were hired but had never moved to Seattle.
Yeah,
so
and traffic is bad in Seattle.
It's not so simple just to say you only live 10 minutes away. Instead of staying home, just come into the office.
Okay,
right? Like for you and I, that's easy, right?
Big deal.
Come back to the office, Sarah Rebecca. Okay, right. Am I going to drive or ride my bike? Right?
So all corporate employees have to go back to work.
So obviously there was some pushback and whatnot. And then they hire a new CEO, which was quite the hubbub because their former CEO didn't last that long, et cetera. Again, shout out to the Acquired podcast. But it turns out that the new CEO that they really, really wanted as a former CEO of Chipotle lives in, I have to look down, Newport Beach, California.
Oh, lovely area.
Beautiful.
That man is not going to want to move, I promise you, from Newport Beach to Seattle.
You may or may not know that Newport Beach, California is not Seattle.
Different state and everything.
Many Starbucks employees pointed out right away. And because this is a public company, the terms of his compensation and hiring were public. And it turns out that some of the terms were Starbucks would pay to set up a remote office for him in Newport Beach. And when he did need to go to Seattle to commute to Seattle, they would provide a private jet. For him to fly back and forth. So this created a few problems. One, environmental concerns, because apparently private jets are not great for the environment, just to have one person on a jet.
It's probably not apparently. That's just true.
This is not a struggle I've had in my own life, but I've heard such things.
Yes.
So there was some hubbub about that, but also hubbub because, wait a minute, we all have to be in the office. There were all these explanations given as to why in-person in office was better, but then not for the CEO.
Yeah.
So then there was recovery mode, and Starbucks said, well, he's going to be in 3 days a week. And then since he has taken over, he has said that I'm not going to have a mandate here. You're all adults. We are all adults. We can decide where we work best and we'll do our job best For most of us, most of the time, that will be in the office.
Got it.
But kind of rolled it back a little bit from the mandate.
As they probably had to. So I'm picturing in that example lots of employee communications that probably went along with the initial mandate of everybody coming back into the office, talking about culture and how important it is to engage in person with each other and collaborate, and the best work is done when we're all together in the workplace, right? I can just picture all those communications that were out there and provided to employees, only then to have to take a step back because the CEO doesn't want to be in the office 5 days a week because he wants to stay in Newport Beach. So
are you empathizing with the HR professional, by the way?
I really am.
Responsible for those communications.
You know, that's what I'm thinking about. The poor HR person, right? And to me, there's just a little takeaway here for employers, and that is make sure there's buy-in from the top with regard to truly decisions about what the culture is and the level of in-person engagement that really is expected for that culture. Mm-hmm. It's really difficult for that to shift with the wind, right? You can't make big,
employees are moving, for goodness sakes.
Big, important statements about who we are as a company.
Yeah.
And then try to walk it back because of a hiring decision. So, takeaway there. Second story, Amazon.
Oh, so another one of my favorite companies.
Another one. Amazon also just announced in-person work for all office-based employees 100% starting January 2nd. I'm sure it went over just like it did at Starbucks, right? That's
like a lead balloon.
That hasn't changed. Mm-hmm. And one of their competitors for top talent in the area, Microsoft, jumped right on that and announced that they would not be requiring in-person work, right?
Yeah.
So you can, to me, I thought that was a really interesting story that showed the tension between what a company might think is important to be successful and what's important for employee engagement, that tension between that and also what the people want, right?
What the people
and
want.
what we might have to provide in order to be competitive with hiring and retention and employee satisfaction, et cetera. And that really, to me, I thought, well, that just captures what HR folks are struggling with right now. I mean, truly, those two things. And when you say they're on uneven footing, that's really, I think, what's creating that, because we're trying to accomplish all of these things at once, right?
You know, we didn't plan this ahead of time when we were thinking of stories in the news, but these examples capture something else that's going on too. And I'm also going to mention another Seattle company. Everyone we're talking about happens to be
what's the
in the
deal?
Seattle area. Costco. This isn't new, but they wanted all of their office workers back in the office too. And the explanation there was our store employees have to be in person. Mm-hmm. So for equity purposes, right, it was there was a sense of fairness. That was the explanation. That was the communication, right? If some of us have to be in person all of the time, then all of us really should be in the same boat. So that is just another example of a consideration, right, when we're thinking about culture and messaging and all of that. It also goes to industry, and you and I have talked about this a lot. Microsoft is in what industry? Right? IT, right?
Yeah.
That type of industry is much more likely to be accommodating to remote work than, obviously, retail, where some people just cannot work remotely. And then the Costco example, right? There's a sense of equity. Starbucks, right? They have stores, retail stores. They are not called cafes. Again, listen to the other podcast. They're intentionally called stores. And obviously, a lot of people have to be there in person, right? And so there's a sense of fairness and equity there. So,
all right. Well, you and I have talked a lot and been looking at some statistics
Yeah.
and studies about what's happening right now with remote work, right?
Yep.
So let's start here. Rebecca, why remote work? Why does it matter to employers? What's the benefit maybe of offering remote work, and what are employees saying about why they want to work remotely?
Well, we found for employers, the benefits of remote work are fairly simple and probably fairly obvious to our listeners and watchers, right? One is you can attract more talent that want to work remotely and might not be in your local geographic area.
You've got the whole country and maybe even world at
Right.
your disposal for a job that might require a certain skill, knowledge, expertise.
Some companies, not a lot, it's only about 16%, but some US companies have gone fully remote. So no brick and mortar, so there's obvious cost savings, right, when you do something like that. When you have hybrid workers or most of your workforce is there, but maybe a few are remote for exceptional talent or unusual skill sets, right? The cost savings is a little harder, right, to justify because you're not going to adjust your lease space, your square footage, right? Lease space based on 2 people working remote. But when you go fully remote, and you don't have any brick and mortar support, that can be a very big savings. But mostly it's because the employees want it. So that brings us to, why do employees like remote work? First of all, do employees like remote work?
I was going to say, I think, that varies according to who you talk to.
It varies according to who you talk to. We found, based on the surveys we saw online, that a very high percentage, like almost all employees, want some remote option somehow. That doesn't mean fully remote. It
Flexibility.
Means maybe hybrid,
let's call it flexibility.
Maybe remote when they need to for childcare, et cetera. But they want the option to work remote at least somewhat, right? Most employees do not want to work remote 100% of the time. That's not their
So let's
first
stop
choice.
there, because I do think that's a key takeaway for our listeners. Okay? And this is a pattern I'm seeing play out. The sweet spot is somewhere in the middle.
Yep. That's what employees want the most.
That's what employees really want. They want to have both an opportunity to engage in person in a workplace. They want to have that, and they also want to have some flexibility to work remotely, either on set days or maybe when things are happening in their lives, their dishwasher is broken and somebody's coming, right? Or whatever it is. So, and I think that's important for our listeners to hear and understand that when you think about what employees want, it's an area of gray, and it's both. They want it all. They want it all.
Well, why not?
Right.
So let's talk about hybrid, or not hybrid in the sense of 2 days off, 3 days in. But employees who work out of town remote, right? Who are not located geographically close, who we hired because they have a unique skill set, or they have older family members they need to take care of, et cetera, et cetera. There are lots of reasons. It's still possible to feed that need for in-person connection and work. For instance, we can say once a month you will work in person for a week. Or when everyone is remote. I know departments and some companies that are entirely remote, but they have like once every 6 weeks, once every 8 weeks, a 1 week offsite, and they pick a place and everyone gets together for that time. So when we're talking about hybrid or some sort of mix, I think the first thing people think about is 3 days in the office and 2 days at home. That's certainly very common. But when you have people who are not geographically in the same place, you can also have a hybrid type of situation. Right? It's more like a week at a time, though, or a half a week at a time. Okay, so why do employees want remote work, at least somewhat?
Yeah, what are they saying? What's the reason?
Here are the top reasons I saw. It can be a cost savings. For them,
sure.
Because commuting costs, work clothes, all the blue tops.
Pants really is what it is. Yes.
Exactly. You still have to wear blue tops, I suppose, for your Zoom meetings, but you can't wear the same sweats every day. Food costs. Apparently it's cheaper to eat at home for some people.
Okay.
They like the healthier food choices at home. This is, again, not true for me with my pantry right next to my desk. But for some people, they find they eat
Interesting.
healthier. They find
I feel like they're not being honest about that, but okay.
it's just a survey.
Okay.
Now it's like
All
family
right, what
feud,
else?
right? Survey says. We're going down the list.
Okay.
People have reported that they like working remotely. They feel less burnout when they are working remotely. They feel lower stress levels when they are working remotely. But the number one
I was going to say.
reason,
Okay,
again, if you
yes.
could just imagine the family, you board up there, there's still the number one slot. It's flexibility during their day.
That's what I was going to say. That's it, right? Flexibility during the day. If I want to go for a run at 1 p.m. Because that's when I prefer to go for a run or go to the gym or whatever it is, or take a nap, maybe. There's that flexibility with working remotely that might allow for that. Now, in the second part of this series, we're going to talk a little bit about our expectations for remote workers. So we'll get into that a little bit,
Right.
but understand as a setup that flexibility is one of the most important reasons why employees like to work remotely. So if we're offering remote work as a recruiting and retention strategy, right? It's important to remember that.
Yes.
Right?
So if you don't want the employee to have flexibility
Yes.
during their workday to not be working, you better be crystal clear on that.
Yes.
Because understand the reason that is the most important
That's
reason
why
they are
they like
choosing
it.
to do that.
That's right.
So
there's
we have a
again, there's
clash
that
there.
tension there. There's
Yes.
a clash there to say the employee is thinking, great, there's this flexibility, and when the employer pushes back and says, no, I want you sitting in that chair these specific hours, and it's really a problem for us if you're not, and we're going to be watching your computer, it might not make sense to be offering remote work in the first place to that employee.
By the way, what are the top 3 things employees are doing when working remotely during work hours if they are not being productive?
Surfing the internet. Am I right? I'm going to play Family Feud real quick.
I'm gonna count that. The judges are gonna count that as social media.
Social
yes.
media.
Okay.
Napping.
No.
Oh. Again, they're not telling the truth. Yes. What else?
Household chores and watching TV.
Okay. I know you, Rebecca, had thoughts about what percentage of employees really do prefer some amount of remote work, and some interesting information about the demographics.
Yes.
I think that would be good for our listeners to
I
hear.
thought this was so interesting to see in black and white because it confirms what I think is best for companies and organizations and for my children, right, who are new professionals. But it was nice to see in black and white. So the group that is least likely to want to be 100% remote, least likely, are new professionals, ages 20 through 24. And in fact, that when we look at people who are actually fully remote workers, millennials are the most likely. So
what age group is that
what
again?
age? 25 to 39-year-olds make up
That's a huge chunk.
36% of all remote workers. And I'm talking about
That checks
100%
out
remote
for me,
now.
right?
Then 18 to 24-year-olds make up, 6.99, let's just call it 7% of all remote workers, only 7%. And that is something we have talked about before in terms of training and culture and how hard that is to do remotely. That's probably why younger workers, are not fully
So
remote.
they agree. And I do think let's just pause there for a minute again, right? Because I think there is a misassumption on the part of many businesses that younger workers want to work 100% remote. That's not true.
That's not true.
They actually, based on the survey, based on statistics, of course we're not speaking about individuals, but based on those statistics, they actually agree that it would be better for them to be in person, at least part of the time, minimally hybrid, in order to receive that training and to get grounded in their new job and profession, et cetera. You and I are also parents of kids in that age group. And I can tell you just anecdotally, that's what I see with my kids and all of their friends. They are avoiding job opportunities that are 100% remote. I've heard many of them say, I'm not interested because it's 100% remote. That's not what I want. I don't want to be home all the time. So hear that loud and clear, listeners, right? When you're thinking about what works best for the organization, there might be a strategy at which it's not until employees get grounded in their position or have been there for a period of time that then there's a transition to the possibility of remote work or hybrid work.
For recruiting purposes, keep in mind that if you're hiring entry-level positions that maybe could be remote because of the nature of the job, you will turn people off if you say it's fully remote. So offering a hybrid or in-person option is going to increase your recruiting success.
That's right. And definitely retention.
Definitely.
Because again, anecdotally, I can tell you that the young professionals who are interested in those, who might be interested in a 100% remote position, are not interested in that position long term.
Right.
They're thinking, oh, that's perfect because I can live here for a little while and I can take that job, but I have no intention of staying there for very long.
Yeah, but do remember this group is interested in flexibility.
Yes.
So they want a remote option when they need to be remote, right? They want that flexibility, but not 100% remote. Again, employers must agree with us because only 7% of fully remote employees are in that lowest age bracket. Millennials, again, are the highest, 25 to 39. Probably that sweet spot of being comfortable with the technology and in their homes, maybe having children at home, right? So it's more helpful to be at home. They're a little more established in their careers, already have their colleagues that they're friends with, et cetera, right?
Yeah.
So, Sarah, where do you think the most fully remote workers are located? What state would be your guess?
Well, my first reaction would be to say a state like New York or California where people would prefer not to commute.
That's actually not true.
All right.
I don't get to tell you you're wrong very often, so just take a minute and enjoy it. It's actually Colorado.
Interesting.
And
because people are moving there.
It's just a survey result. Yes. There wasn't the whys. But my guess is places like New York are just so expensive to live. If you are fully remote, you would choose to live someplace else other than New York.
That's a good point. So,
right? You would choose to live someplace less expensive.
Right. They're living in Colorado, but their job is in a different state. It's not
exactly.
Like they're, okay. That actually makes sense. So they chose to live in Colorado.
Let's face it, Colorado is absolutely gorgeous. Yeah. So if you're 100% remote and could work anywhere, right?
And
Colorado's
probably
not a bad place to be.
And enjoy the flexibility.
Yeah, you can ski in the middle of the day, whatever it is. Yes, it's gorgeous there. So what state has the least amount of 100% remote workers?
Oh, I don't know. I'm not gonna make assumptions. You tell me.
Mississippi.
Yeah.
And again,
that was along the lines of what.
And again, we don't know why. It doesn't say why, but I am guessing there's more manufacturing, agricultural jobs that are just less suited towards
fewer office jobs.
Yeah, more higher percentage of either service, agricultural, or manufacturing. Right, where we don't have that option. So, what do workers want? We know they want at least some flexibility.
Flexibility is the key word.
Only 28% are seeking fully remote, 100% remote. And it is the number one factor in choosing a job, that remote, whatever they're looking for, whether it be hybrid or full, that is the number one factor. They put that over salary, over vacation time, over retirement benefits, over anything else you can offer. So as employers are thinking about how to competitively recruit, that's a no-brainer, right? Is to offer flexibility.
And I think the key word, again, is flexibility, right? Flexibility in work location that may look different for different positions, for different locations, etc. But being able to communicate that the organization is open to flexibility, I think would provide a competitive advantage.
Agree. Okay, so now that folks are rethinking, maybe being a little more intentional, are we going to allow remote work? Are we going to allow hybrid work? What
Right.
will work best for our organization for retention, recruiting, etc.? We've been living with this in large numbers since 2020.
Yeah.
So people are familiar with some issues that have popped up. We're seeing now that the remote work is becoming more regular, or at least hybrid work.
Right.
We're seeing certain issues at the forefront,
Right.
more and more. So on our next episode, we're going to talk about those key issues that are really front and center
Exactly.
right now with remote workers.
And as always, our ideas for maybe how to take proactive steps to avoid those issues.
Yes. Explain the problem, then fix it.
Awesome.
Right? On our next episode. See you then.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Thank you.